Discover 20 incredible truths that will transform your life. Embrace them for amazing freedom. The clatter of desks and the echo of restless teenagers faded into a blur as Sarah seized the moment in the echoing silence of her thoughts. What had happened to the dreams of curiosity and discovery? The weight of monotonous grading, restless classes, and forgotten experiments suffocated her ambition. At 34, with a PhD in biology, she often felt like a ghost haunting the hallways of a school that seemed to have forgotten her brilliance, just a seat in an unyielding system that churned out grades instead of fostering sparks of true creativity. Hidden beneath the surface was a constant worry about her family's mounting debts. With her father out of work, the pressure mounted like a blanket of fog that choked her aspirations. As she sat across from Mr. Thompson on that late afternoon, the familiar warmth of his presence should have been soothing. Yet, unease gripped her. He spoke of resilience, of breaking through barriers with impassioned vitality, but the stories felt like faint echoes between them. Would she ever break free? Like the autumn leaves swirling at the base of an unread book, her dreams were becoming a forgotten collection of memories, faded like the paint on an old fence. Suddenly, the conversation shifted. Mr. Thompson's twinkling eyes ignited something deep within her as he unleashed tales of breakthroughs amidst chaos that transcended institutional discrimination. Each word resonated with a fanfare of urgency, awakening a whisper from within, the urge to create, to paint, to express in ways the rigid confines of her classroom never allowed. But doubts immediately crept in, demanding her attention. What would the community say? Just a side hobby, they'd whisper. Would her colleagues dismiss her burgeoning talent, see it as a threat rather than inspiration? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Sarah's heart raced as the worries bubbled within her, intensifying as she returned to school. Each corridor echoed with the doubt of her choices, the pressure from her colleagues stifling her resolve. Just when she thought she could carve her own path with newfound vigor, a co-worker, emboldened by jealousy, struck from the shadows, seeking to diminish her growing recognition. Anguish twisted in her gut. Should she retaliate, pull the rug from under her colleague to preserve her fragile new identity? The weight of integrity clawed at her, but ambitions hollered for survival. Every brushstroke one moment felt like a retreat from the security she built, and in the next, it brimmed with the hope of sparking change. Yet the looming school board meeting echoed in her mind, a testament to the systemic biases she pondered confronting. Could her art serve as a window to truth? As she prepared her presentation, brushing bold colors on canvas, the reality of bastions forged in convention unleashed a storm inside her. Moments of false calm punctuated the hysteria of feelings, clawing at her sanity. Gritting her teeth against uncertainty, the familiar tension flooded her chest. She must choose. And as she wiped her brow, preparing to unveil her creation before a community on the verge of change, she couldn't help but wonder, would the act of revealing these truths elevate her, or would it entangle her deeper in the chaos of conformity? The stage flickered with anticipation, a prelude to the hurricane of questions yet to come. Standing backstage, Sarah closed her eyes, breathing deeply as the cacophony of whispering souls and the rustling of papers faded into an enduring silence within her. The warmth of the stage lights washed over her, illuminating a pathway that felt both inviting and treacherous. Her hand gripped the edges of the canvas, where vibrant hues danced, each color infused with the essence of hope and turmoil. The school board meeting loomed ahead, a judgment day where her colleagues could either uplift her aspirations or drown them in skepticism. She envisioned the faces that lined the auditorium, some supportive, others skeptical. Would they appreciate her perspective as an educator, or would they reduce her passion to mere folly? Sarah's thoughts spiraled, but she quickly anchored herself. Art, she believed, could serve as a catalyst. It was a medium through which she could challenge the prevailing discourse, confront biases, and express truths often obscured by conformity. But could her colleagues handle the audacity of such revelations? When the moderator called her name, it resonated like a tolling bell, slicing through her uncertainties. With trembling determination, Sarah stepped onto the stage and felt the wave of eyes upon her. For a brief moment, doubt threatened to resurface, but she turned toward her canvas, letting the brush guide her spirit as she began her narrative. Today, she began, her voice steadying with each word, I invite you to look beyond what is conventionally accepted. I wish to transform perceptions of education through colors and shapes that speak volumes. As she spoke, she unveiled layers of symbolism embedded in her work, the roots of a tree representing growth against adversity, colors suggesting joy and despair, and strokes that emulated the often unacknowledged struggles of both educators and students. With each description, her mind raced, replaying the scissors of criticism that had once severed her confidence. She fought against an emerging tide of self-doubt. This was not merely about her artwork, but about her voice, the very voice she'd nearly silenced. Would this transparent expression breathe life into their stagnant conversations, or was she merely setting herself up for another dismissal? As she ventured deeper into her presentation, her passion ignited applause from some corners, while a few colleagues remained unmoved, their frowns hardening like winter frost. The room buzzed, opinions ricocheted back and forth. Despite the resistance, an ember of resolve glimmered within her, reminding her that her journey was finally about to diverge from predictable paths of safety. This was her crucible of forge to shape new possibilities. After her presentation concluded, the floodgates of dialogue opened. Heated debates ignited and cooled, while Sarah engaged with colleagues, embracing challenges to her ideas that surfaced with a ferocity she hadn't anticipated. It felt like wrestling a tempest, the exchange both invigorating and exhausting. With every question posed to her, an unfamiliar sensation bubbled beneath her skin, the thrill of being alive, of challenging the very conventions that had boxed her in for too long. She discovered that her convictions, once buried under layers of doubt, could command attention and invoke change. She was no longer merely a teacher, she was a catalyst. But just when she thought the storm had settled, her most vehement critic stood to speak. Would this moment tear down all she had painstakingly crafted? So, what you propose is merely an escape, he stated bluntly, his tone dripping with disdain. Art cannot replace structured learning. Sarah felt her heart race, the churning urge to respond rising in her throat. What do you say to defend your newfound identity against a formidable adversary? Gripping her brush, now a metaphorical sword, she prepared to confront the truth of herself once more. Was this the moment to unleash the fervor she had harnessed, or would she retreat into the shadows again? The next words that came to her lips would determine not just the outcome of this debate, but her own path forward. The tension in the room thickened, wrapping around Sarah like a vice. She could feel the weight of her colleague's accusation, sharp and piercing, as if he had thrust a knife into the heart of her aspirations. The air was electric, charged not just with dissent, but with an opportunity, a moment to articulate her belief in the transformative power of art. You're right, Sarah finally said, her voice steadying, reflecting vigor she barely recognized in herself. Art cannot replace structured learning. But it can redefine how we approach education altogether. ISNT education about sparking curiosity, fostering connections, and understanding our world in a way that structured teaching sometimes fails to encompass? Her gaze locked onto her critics, and for a moment, the auditorium faded away. Amplified doubt stirred within her own mind. Was she merely the voice of a desperate artist, searching for meaning in colors and canvases? Or was she urging them towards something revolutionary? As she held her ground, answering with authenticity, she felt a rhythm flow through her, a powerful connection to her purpose as an educator, a bridge between the academic and the artistic. The murmurs of conversation shifted, some colleagues leaned forward, grappling with her points, while others remained entrenched, their skepticism like an unyielding shield. She pressed on, systematically dismantling the myth that art was a mere distraction from academic rigor. Art offers perspective, she insisted. It reveals hidden truths, emotions, struggles, and stories that resonate with students in profound ways. Isn't it our duty as educators to explore every avenue that fosters understanding? As her words unfolded, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her opponent's face. Had she struck a nerve? The pulse of the room shifted, anticipation crackled like static in the air. A few allies chimed in, supporting her assertion, each voice adding fuel to the flames of dialogue. Sarah felt the surge of empowerment. She was no longer a vessel of doubt, but a beacon of possibility. Despite the unfolding validation, she felt the enormity of casting aside fear. The peril of rejection still loomed. She was risking everything in challenging entrenched norms, risking her credibility among peers for the chance of inspiring vibrant teaching that resonated with the very students they were meant to uplift. Then, the moderator interjected, redirecting the spiraling conversation. Let us hear from others. What do we think about this integration of art into our curriculum? The skills within the room, the ideas flaring and fading at lightning speed, felt like an electric ballet. For Sarah, it was an invitation to not retreat but rather to launch herself forward into the fray. In that moment, the spirited exchanges ignited new clarity within her. She was learning just as much from her colleagues' counterarguments as they were from her defense. Each challenge sharpened her resolve and revealed a deep reservoir of passion she hadn't fully acknowledged. This was about much more than her art. It was about redefining education itself, about harnessing creativity to embroider academic structure. But as the dialogue ebbed and flowed, a chilling realization seeped through her veins. Some may never embrace this vision, no matter how passionately it was presented. A quiet voice of fear whispered in the back of her mind, what if this debate unraveled her career rather than bolstered it? As the meeting continued, Sarah's confidence floundered again, each breath tinged with anticipation and dread of her opponent's final blows. She could feel the stakes heightening, and even as she strived to speak with conviction, nagging uncertainty clawed at the edges of her spirit. Was she ready to stand her ground when the true fight came? Would she ultimately find the courage to surrender to her transformative calling, despite the fear that loomed ahead? A final volley of comments from her detractors began to shape, and as she prepared to engage once more, a lingering unease knotted in her stomach. It was now or never. The time had come to confront her fears, to dissect the very notion of self-doubt that had followed her like a shadow. Would she dare step fully into the role that the universe was laying before her, or would she falter at the brink of her transformation? The answers were just about to unfold, setting the stage for a battle not only with her colleagues but with her very soul. As Sarah prepared to re-enter the fray, her heart raced with urgency. This was her moment, possibly the one that could redirect her career and influence her colleagues' perspectives. Yet, just like an artist facing a blank canvas, she found herself questioning how best to shape the narrative of her own life. The doubt crashed over her like a wave, but somewhere within that tumult, a spark ignited. I need to approach this differently, she thought, a new strategy forming as her colleagues' voices echoed in her ears. She couldn't just counter their points, she had to elevate the conversation. Instead of focusing solely on defending art's place in education, she realized she had to illustrate the shortfalls of their current methods. Unrushed, she shifted her view, no longer viewing them as opponents but as potential allies. Let us envision a classroom, Sarah urged, creating a landscape of thoughts that painted themselves vividly in the auditorium's air. Imagine students not just memorizing facts but connecting with their lessons through the lens of their own creativity. How do we nurture a generation that can think critically and empathetically? Are we giving them the tools to articulate their own feelings, their own stories? A collective pause settled over the assembly, as if her words had spun a web, compelling her colleagues to consider a new reality. Could she really make them see? Moments like these felt significant. They sparked an internal evolution rooted in her belief that teaching should go beyond textbooks. However, despite the success that lingered in the air, doubt still loomed like a cloud overhead, threatening to cast its shadow over her newfound resolve. Was that enough? She thought, considering if she had struck the right tone, if she had infused her passion appropriately. Should I dig deeper into the curriculum failures? Or perhaps focus on emotional intelligence instead? Emotions swirled through her, an orchestra of inspiration mixed with trepidation. The fierce desire for transformation clashed with fears of mediocrity, anxiety over backlash, and dread over the consequences of failure. A hand shot up from the back of the room. It was Mark, one of the staunchest traditionalists at the faculty. His skepticism had been palpable during her earlier comments. But what about the academic rigor? Isn't there a risk that this approach could dilute essential learning outcomes? We can't afford to compromise our standards. The question hung dangerously in the air, and Sarah could feel the collective tension build again, her heartbeat pulsating in sync with the mounting pressure. This was it, a direct challenge. She had anticipated such counterpoints, yet now that they confronted her, she felt the familiar tremor of self-doubt threaten her steadiness. As she stood there, the room silent in expectancy, something shifted. This wasn't merely about defending art, it was about advocating for holistic education. She took a breath, summoning her inner strength. "I wholeheartedly agree with academic standards," she countered, her voice gaining strength with each word. "But perhaps academic rigor does not strictly equate to traditional methods. I'm proposing the addition of art as a tool to enhance student engagement and understanding, not as a replacement." Looking around, she locked eyes with a few colleagues who had been nodding along, their expressions shifting from skepticism to intrigue. This was more than just a debate, it was a collaborative exploration, an invitation to innovate that resonated deeply within her. Inspired by their reactions, Sarah allowed herself to envision a classroom bursting with possibility. Students engaging deeply with subjects, enveloped in art, literature, and diverse perspectives, a vibrant tapestry of learning. Things could be different. However, just as she began to feel the tide turning, a flicker of doubt introduced a new uncertainty. What if he was right? What if there were flaws in her vision that she couldn't perceive? Suddenly, the weight of responsibility felt crushing, as if she were teetering on a tightrope stretched high above the ground, with only the chance of revolution on the other side. Focused solely on her mission to create change, she had also awakened old fears, those that had stifled her spirit before. The battle was twofold now: to advocate for a broader perspective on education and to confront her intrinsic fears of inadequacy. Her pulse quickened as she deliberated her next words, the stakes spiraling higher. Could she really challenge the status quo while grappling with her own sense of purpose? The moment felt critical, a pivotal point that could either lead to failure or ignite further struggles within herself. As she prepared to respond once more, an unexpected thought crossed her mind, tantalizing and terrifying. If this engagement fails to deliver change, what will it mean for my identity as an educator? Reassessing this reality added weight to the transformative journey she embarked upon. With everything on the line, Sarah knew she had to roar, not cower. The time had come to embrace the debate, to push through the fissures of doubt, beckoning her to redefine her trajectory as both an educator and an artist. Would she clear the chasm between uncertainty and self-assurance? The answer was just within reach, but would she seize it? As Sarah stood at the precipice of decision, a wave of clarity surged through her. This was not merely a battle over educational methodology, it was an assertion of her identity and belief in a revolutionary way to teach. Her voice quavered slightly as she paused, contemplating how to weave her thoughts. "Mark, I hear your concern, and it resonates with our collective fear of losing rigor. But what if we embrace a new definition of academic success? Engagement and creativity can enrich understanding without sacrificing standards," she proposed, her conviction igniting the words. In that moment, the tension shifted again, threading curiosity through the skepticism. As she spoke, she felt her own passion for teaching seep into her statements. Sarah's heart raced not just from fear but also from the exhilaration of being heard. The more she articulated her vision, the more it felt like she was painting with vibrant, bold colors on a once muted canvas. Each assertion she made seemed to resonate deeper, tugging at the fabric of their current beliefs while inviting them into uncharted territory. Yet, the specter of doubt flickered at the edges of her mind. Had she constructed a solid enough argument? Would her colleagues see through the enthusiasm and recognize the potential pitfalls? She couldn't afford to falter now, she needed to sustain her momentum. "I want to propose a pilot program, a blending of our core curriculum with integrated art projects," she continued firmly, presenting a tangible action plan. "Let us measure its impact on student engagement and cognitive retention. If we genuinely believe in our standards, this endeavor will only enhance our mission, not undermine it." As the words escaped her, she watched as some of her colleagues scribbled notes, while others leaned forward in interest. Small victories began to accumulate, nudging her confidence further, each positive glance reinforcing her stance. But deep within, a tempest raged. What if the pilot proved unsuccessful? What if the data drowned her vision before it took flight? The implications loomed large, casting a shadow over her growing bravado. This time, rather than retreating into self-doubt, a new belief clawed its way to the surface: one failure wouldn't define her. It was the journey that mattered. I'm not asking for blind faith, she added, her tone steady. I'm asking for a chance to explore the possibilities together, to collaborate and create a genuinely enriching experience for our students. Our goal is not only to educate but to inspire future innovators. With each word, the need for consensus receded. Sarah didn't need everyone to agree, she needed a few key allies who grasped the vision she envisioned, who could see the potential alongside her. Mark's skepticism still lingered, but a flicker of intrigue flickered in his eyes. As she surveyed the room, the eddy of uncertainty began to settle. She was not just defending art as a pedagogy, she was redefining what it meant to be educators. Inspiration coursed through her veins, invigorating her to push further. Let us take the bold step toward a richer educational experience, she implored. We have the chance to mold the minds that will one day change the world. What we do here today can echo far beyond these walls. The silence that followed felt heavy yet charged with a newfound sense of possibility. As Sarah glanced around the auditorium, a question emerged within her mind, ignited by the fear and thrill that now coexisted. Would her vision take root, or would her colleagues resist clinging to the familiar? The heaviness of the moment was palpable, a tension that could snap or sustain. She took a breath, preparing to welcome any adversarial responses, knowing that the real confrontation was only beginning. In that instant, she understood that in order to grow, she would need to push through the barrier of uncertainty and embrace the risks of her vision. But as Mark shifted in his seat, his brow furrowed deeper, she realized that the very foundation of her proposal could be a crossing point for deeper conflict. Could she navigate the psychological war between tradition and innovation without losing herself along the way? The echoes of that uncertainty hummed in her mind, setting the stage for a confrontation she had yet to face. Would she unravel the doubts within and answer her true calling as an artist and educator? Or would she stumble into the abyss she'd feared? The silence stretched, a taut string poised to snap. Sarah felt every heartbeat pounding against the confines of her mind, each thump resonating a mix of hope and fear. What would happen next? She turned her attention to Mark, who had been visibly wrestling with her proposal. His furrowed brow and crossed arms signaled an internal battle that felt oddly familiar to her own struggle. You're suggesting that creativity should be interwoven with our core curriculum, but how do we know that our students will meet established benchmarks? What happens if they fall behind? Mark finally voiced his skepticism, his tone cautious but edged with genuine concern. His words ignited a series of rapid thoughts within her. She felt the weight of them pressing down, threatening to erode her confidence. Yet, even amid rising anxiety, a part of her recognized an opportunity. Mark wasn't merely challenging her, he was offering a portal to deeper conversation. This could evolve beyond just defending her idea, it could be a collaborative refinement of it. Those are valid points, she conceded, her voice breaking through the tension that had gripped the room. But what if we reframe the perspective altogether? What if struggling with creativity isn't the enemy of rigorous standards but rather a pathway to them? Engaging students through diverse forms of expression might foster an intrinsic motivation that they would otherwise lack. Mark leaned back slightly, and the interest piqued among her colleagues became palpable. It seemed her commitment was beginning to challenge their preconceived notions, slowly unearthing layers of curiosity that the traditional framework had long suppressed. Think about the artists, the inventors, and the thinkers who have shaped our world, Sarah continued, feeling a surge of resolve. Their first steps were often fraught with failure, but isn't that the essence of learning? To risk, to stumble, and to rise again? As she spoke, she became acutely aware of the dynamic in the auditorium. It was no longer just a battle for her vision, but a quest to kindle the collective imagination of a group of educators. The realization prompted an internal transformation. Each word she spoke added shades of conviction, building a rippling momentum behind her rationale. Still, the specter of doubt lingered, whispering objections in the shadows of her mind. Could she truly effect change? Did she possess the unique qualities needed to rise as a catalyst for innovation? To answer those questions, Sarah needed to delve deeper into her own reservoir of creativity and resilience. Suddenly, an idea surfaced, a realization of the very competencies she might have overlooked in herself. What if the fears that plagued her were the very experiences she needed to embody for her students? Sarah decided she would not only offer a program but lead by example, demonstrating how embracing vulnerability could foster growth. I am prepared to face the uncertainties myself. We can create forums for students to express their artistic interpretations and apply their learning in practical, imaginative ways, she asserted, looking each of her colleagues in the eye. Through this process, I will also gather data and observations that hold us accountable, all the while encouraging our students to explore the limitless boundaries of their potential. The collective air in the room shifted again, buoyed by her newfound assertiveness. But alongside the rush of anticipation, another voice erupted from the back, a colleague named Linda, known for her staunch adherence to tradition. That sounds commendable, Sarah, but what if your students fail to produce? What then? How do we balance our responsibility as educators with the risk of promoting an elusive ideal? The challenge had been laid out bare. Linda's piercing inquiry reignited the tension but also encapsulated the crux of Sarah's dilemma. A palpable silence enveloped the auditorium, punctuated only by the sound of a single pencil dropping to the floor. Sarah inhaled deeply. This was more than just a pivotal moment in their discussion, it was the embodiment of the choices she needed to make about her professional journey. The stakes had reached a new echelon, and it was not merely her proposal on the line but the essence of who she wanted to become. The tone shifted again, becoming even more urgent. The time has come to face the truth, she thought, recognizing the familiar battle lines. Either I defend the rigid confines of the system or I leap into the unknown possibilities of what we could achieve together. The energy hummed with unanswered questions. Would she muster the courage to navigate the profound responsibility resting on her shoulders? Or would the grip of tradition pull her back into shadowed complacency? As she prepared to confront Linda's challenge head-on, Sarah felt the weight of destiny bearing down. Little did she know, the next moment would demand her to define not only her professional aspirations but her very identity as an educator. Would courage lead her toward the transformational path of innovation, or would fear bind her to the past? The intensity in the auditorium thickened, a palpable force wrapping around Sarah as she prepared to respond to Linda. Her heart raced, but within her trepidation lay an ember of determination. This was the moment of truth, an opportunity to elevate her message and reveal her depth as an educator. Linda, Sarah began, her voice steadier than she felt, that question is crucial, but it also highlights the very essence of where we stand as educators. The risk of failure shouldn't paralyze us. Instead, it should propel us to create a supportive environment where students feel safe to explore, experiment, and yes, sometimes fail. Isn't that what we want for our students, to be resilient in the face of challenges? Coaching her thoughts to become outward-facing, she envisioned her words touching every educator seated before her. We're not just teaching subjects, we're shaping minds that will navigate a complex world. If we only teach them to avoid failure without offering them the tools to face it, how will they ever learn to rise? There it was, the spark of an awakening narrative she had hoped to galvanize. She noted Mark nodding slightly, perhaps realizing what she had only recently come to grasp: this wasn't just about benchmarks or traditional metrics. It was about preparing the next generation for life beyond the classroom. However, as Sarah continued, internal voices wrestled within her. Was she being too idealistic? What if students truly did struggle to meet the standards? What if her own colleagues could not see the end goal? Doubt threatened to encroach, and she struggled to maintain an air of credibility amidst the whirlwind of questions cascading from her mind. Every artist had a first painting that didn't resonate, every scientist a hypothesis that fell flat. Yet they persevered, and in doing so, fostered growth not just within themselves, but for those who would follow. She pressed on, her intensity now morphing into passion. We owe it to our students to model that resilience. Failure isn't a destination, it's a stepping stone on their pathway to success. As she surveyed her audience, she sensed a shift among her peers. Linda appeared momentarily taken aback but raised an eyebrow. Was it skepticism still, or a hint of acknowledgement? Let us build a curriculum where each student's unique voice is not only heard but celebrated. Let us use creativity as a vehicle to engage deeper learning. We can track progress without foregoing exploration. Data doesn't have to be the enemy, rather a guide as we navigate these uncharted waters together, she persisted, infusing her argument with a newfound resolve. A deeper truth dawned upon her throughout this discourse. She stood at the intersection of fear and possibility, a junction where the comfort of the past clashed with the demand of growth. The knowledge of her hidden strengths became a quiet revolution brewing within. She was capable of effecting change if she dared to embrace it openly. But the lingering question, now galvanized into something formidable, remained: would she have the energy to sustain this momentum beyond today? Would she continue to lead this charge in her broader professional landscape beyond this very meeting? As the auditorium fell asleep under that wisp of anticipation, Sarah knew that winning this moment meant not merely advocating for a proposal. She must develop a robust framework of continuous dialogue. She felt ready to ignite a series of initiatives pursuing this cause: workshops, collaborations, and practical experiments, a community fostering imagination over fear. Just as she was about to volunteer for next steps in this potential evolution, another voice emerged from the crowd, shaking the very ground she had begun to build beneath her feet. Organizing all of that sounds great, but what will be your strategy to ensure this isn't just a passing trend in your classroom? The assertion was driven by someone she had previously respected, someone who seemed to challenge her resolve at every turn. There was no easy answer, and the whirlwind began anew within her thoughts. How could she guarantee sustainability without losing the spark that had ignited this vision? Would she find a greater purpose in defining a strategy that aligns creative pursuits with educational standards? Caught between the wave of enthusiasm brewing within and the stark realities of implementation, Sarah confronted the challenge head-on, now fully aware that each step she took could either propel her forward into uncharted territories or trap her back in the familiar confines of doubt. With her future hanging delicately in the balance, she felt the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The next chapter would demand a fusion of action and introspection, for the path to transformation was fraught with tests of her dedication and innovation. What awaited Sarah could be the defining moment of her professional evolution or the reflection of a voice yet to be fully realized. The moment hung in the air like a fragile thread, every eye in the auditorium piercing through her, demanding a response that would set the course for her journey ahead. Sarah felt the weight of expectation coiling around her, fueling and constraining her all at once. How could she respond? It wasn't merely an inquiry, but a challenge that reverberated through the very foundation of her vision. "You're right," she acknowledged, her voice a mixture of humility and resolve. "The sustainability of our initiatives is essential. Ideas must evolve from theories into actionable strategies. I must not only inspire but ensure that inspiration manifests into lasting practices." She drew a deep breath, each inhalation grounding her in the reality of what lay ahead. That starts with establishing clear, measurable goals that align with our broader educational standards while still embracing creativity. We need a framework flexible, yet structured, that allows for adaptation over time. In the depths of her mind, Sarah felt her thoughts crystallizing into a plan, igniting a fire of determination. But doubt still nipped at her heels. What if her colleagues resisted? What if the system itself proved insurmountable? Yet, she also recognized she wielded a rare opportunity to redefine the very fabric of her educational environment. "Perhaps we begin small," she continued, "with pilot programs in our classrooms that allow us to collect data and assess impact periodically. Feedback from our students could serve as invaluable insight into what truly nurtures their learning. Through open dialogues and collaborative reflections, we create an evolving narrative, rooted in resilience rather than complacency." She observed the faint flicker of interest transforming into sparks across faces in the crowd. Was this what they needed, the contemplation of progress that bridged their cautious tendencies with her call for creative liberation? The sound of a pen scratching on paper broke the silence as Mark leaned forward, intent on capturing every word. Perhaps he, too, saw the potential for change and recognized the value of marrying creativity and accountability. Her heart surged with cautious hope. As she concluded, she sensed the tide turning, a moment of collective contemplation washing over the audience. Acknowledging the profound nature of their discussion, she was filled with a mix of pride and vulnerability. Her vision had resonated, but the road ahead was still daunting. Would they support her? Would this be the catalyst they all deeply craved? After an emotional pause, Linda chimed back, softer now, her voice more reflective. "Sarah, it's clear you've put a lot of thought into this. But the challenge of getting buy-in from everyone on board is immense. Do you have a specific outreach plan? There it was again, the reality of implementation pressing against her dreams. Creating a compelling, unified front among colleagues required more than enthusiasm, it demanded an understanding of shared values. She would need to facilitate discussions that united their different perspectives without erasing the vibrancy of her vision. I propose creating a dedicated committee, Sarah replied, her mind racing ahead. A team drawing from diverse backgrounds and expertise, fostering a collaborative environment where each voice is valued. Curating buy-in starts with listening as much as sharing. Is that feasible? She felt the room absorb the weight of her proposition. The notion of establishing a steering committee felt like a small yet pivotal step towards momentum. But as she spoke, a deeper realization struck her. This commitment would require her to delve into people as fears and objections, navigating landscapes where harmony was often undercut by divergent experiences. Would she evoke harmony or create rifts? As she faced the daunting task of uniting beliefs and aspirations, she recognized this journey was as much about the collective as it was about her evolution. Her pulse quickened with both dread and exhilaration. As the meeting drew to a close, Sarah understood that leading this initiative meant she was stepping into a new role, one of a facilitator, a mediator, and yet still a passionate advocate. Determined to embrace this challenge, she committed herself to drafting initial proposals and outreach strategies. Yet, an internal knot of worry remained. Could she anchor this vision in the storm of resistance? What unseen obstacles lay just beyond the horizon? As the chatter of attendees began to accompany the exit of their issue-laden minds, Sarah grasped the gravity of what she was about to pursue. The coming days and weeks would be filled with delicate conversations, negotiations, and inevitable confrontations. With a swelling sense of resolve, she knew one thing: the real test had only begun. The draw of stepping forward was palpable, yet the prospect of retreat loomed starkly in the backdrop. What choices would define her? Which connections would empower her to overcome the pending struggles? As she left the auditorium, a burning question crystallized in her mind: would she have the courage to face potential failure head-on, proving that it was indeed a pathway, not an endpoint? The promise of transformation beckoned. The next morning, Sarah awoke with the sunlight filtering through her window, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill of uncertainty lingering in her mind. The words of her colleagues from the meeting echoed relentlessly in her thoughts, compelling her to confront her own fears. As she sipped her coffee, she formulated a plan for the committee, a foundation built on the principles she so passionately advocated for. A proactive model stemming from collaboration, respect, and adaptability. Despite the urgency that propelled her forward, a gnawing doubt surfaced. Would her vision translate into meaningful change? Taking her notebook, she began jotting down potential members for the committee, including both enthusiastic supporters and those less predisposed to her ideas. Each name represented not just a colleague, but a unique perspective, a potential source of both collaboration and conflict. She remembered Linda S. caution, her voice tempered with the weight of pragmatism. How could she foster meaningful dialogue when the very foundation of her plan relied on navigating apprehensions? Sarah had always believed in boldness, but her confidence now felt precariously balanced with vulnerability. Arriving at the office, she found herself standing before her co-workers, wrestling internally as she initiated casual conversations. Would these encounters help her uncover insights? Or might they serve only to exacerbate the fractures in the group? The initial dialogues were tentative, yet illuminating. Each opinion shared peeled back layers of misunderstanding, revealing underlying motivations. Sarah, do you really think we can shift our entire curriculum based on feedback? Another teacher asked after she shared her vision for implementing pilot programs. The skepticism in his tone stung, but rather than retreating, Sarah sensed an opportunity for deeper exploration. I don't just want to shift it, I want us to adapt it together, she replied, her voice steady. Our students' experiences should guide our strategies. It's about a sustainable transformation that serves their needs, not just ours. This back and forth forced her to contemplate her role beyond that of a visionary. She realized she was becoming a negotiator in a dance of conflicting ideologies. With every interaction, she began to draw a clearer picture of her colleagues' fears and aspirations. But she was also learning that her vision had to evolve in tandem with theirs. Days turned into an iterative process of drafting, pitching, and refining her proposal. She spent evenings poring over notes and strategies, often grappling with ideas about tackling internal resistance. Each conversation served as both a crest of hope and a trough of anxiety. Ultimately, the need for clarity became undeniable, and she returned to her original vision with renewed focus. A breakthrough moment came when she organized a casual meeting with a core group of supporters. Framed as an open discussion rather than a presentation, Sarah wanted to hear rather than simply speak. What emerged was a tapestry of ideas interwoven with genuine concern. The delicate balance of creativity and accountability was alive in the room. She remained vigilant, respecting diverse perspectives while gently steering the narrative toward her overarching goals. But as she engaged with her colleagues, a deeper revelation began to flicker in the background of her thoughts. What if she was not just redefining classroom dynamics but her own identity? Each critique could chip away at her resolve or hone her focus, sculpting her leadership style and fortifying her vision. After weeks of intense discussions and emotional confrontations, Sarah stood one evening in her dimly lit office, ruminating on unyielding challenges. The ink of her pen had barely dried on the latest proposal when a knock on the door startled her. It was Mark, the quiet colleague who had seemed so receptive at the meeting. "Can we talk?" His gaze held an intensity indicative of something deeper brewing beneath their previous exchanges. Something shifted in her chest, the prospect of another critical conversation igniting both apprehension and intrigue. Would this discussion lead to a decisive shift in support, or would it unravel her progress in unexpected ways? "Of course," she said, bracing herself for the uncharted waters ahead. The implications loomed larger than any detail she could craft. What secrets lay behind his request, ready to reshape everything she'd worked for? "I've been thinking about our recent discussions," Mark began, his face etched with consideration. "You present a compelling vision for integrating art into our curriculum, but I'm concerned about how to implement it without overwhelming our current structures." The tone of his voice held a hint of urgency, and Sarah sensed he was grappling with the weight of his own beliefs. In that moment, she realized she wasn't merely fighting for her ideas, she was engaging in a dialogue that could genuinely reshape their educational framework. "I appreciate your honesty, Mark," Sarah replied, her voice steadying as she leaned into her purpose. "This isn't just about the art itself, it's about evolving the way we teach and engage with our students. We need to find that balance, not only in our curriculum but in how we understand our roles as educators." Mark's posture softened a bit, a flicker of acceptance crossing his face. "I want to see this work as much as you do. But how do we address those who are still skeptical? The ones driven by tradition?" The challenge reconnected her to the heart of her mission. Sarah understood that engaging skeptics was crucial. It was about fostering respect and inclusivity so everyone felt a part of the change process. "We need to cultivate a culture of openness," she proposed. "Let us draw from our collective experiences and create a series of workshops where educators can share their thoughts, voice their concerns, and collaborate on potential projects. If we can involve those who are critical, we can demonstrate the tangible benefits of a more integrated approach." Mark remained quiet for a moment, processing her proposal. "Workshops could be a good start," he finally said. "Creating a safe space may invite those who feel threatened by this change, allowing them to seamlessly transition from skepticism to inquiry." This breakthrough marked a vital shift in Sarah. She understood that forging alliances was essential for her vision to thrive, and her willingness to accommodate diverse opinions reaffirmed her role not just as a leader but also as a listener. "Exactly. It invites collaboration," Sarah agreed, her enthusiasm rising again. "By fostering an inclusive dialogue, we create an avenue for everyone's voice to be heard, which is what our students deserve as well." As they spoke of next steps, Sarah felt her confidence cementing into solid ground. The power of their conversation filled her with renewed purpose. Here she was, engaged not just in advocacy for transformative teaching methods but in an essential act of leadership shaping a communal vision that scaffolded innovation onto the experience of education. The subsequent days witnessed the birth of a series of workshops designed to unite teachers of varying disciplines. Sarah meticulously crafted agendas that encouraged expression, concern, and advocacy. Each session became a haven for those willing to confront their fears and embrace potentiality. Educators began sharing stories, ideas, and philosophies that transcended conventional norms. Gradually, Sarah noticed a shift within her colleagues. Attitudes softened, conversations deepened, and camaraderie blossomed. Many were eager to integrate creativity into their practices, challenging themselves to re-examine the boundaries of learning. The very essence of education began morphing before her eyes, the fruit of her persistence born from the seeds she had sowed through vulnerability, authenticity, and relentless determination. Soon her principal approached her in the staff lounge, beaming. "The board has noticed the enthusiasm stemming from your initiative and supports it. They want to see an official proposal based on the feedback from your workshops." In that instant, a wave of affirmation washed over Sarah. This was the recognition she had long sought. She had transitioned from feeling like an invisible instructor, stifled in the shadow of her ambitions, to standing at the forefront of a movement toward educational transformation. This acknowledgement was not merely gratifying, it sparked a newfound sense of authority in her role. Over the following weeks, Sarah labored over drafting a comprehensive proposal that encapsulated the workshop's findings, potential pilot programs, and implementation strategies. Every detail reflected her evolution from a seeker of validation to a confident advocate poised to redefine education as a collective artistry. Finally, the day of presentation arrived. Standing before the board, Sarah articulated her vision, an educational paradigm where creativity and academic rigor harmonized in unison, an anthem calling for flourishing minds. She backed her ideas with data gathered from workshops, educator testimonials, and case studies from other institutions. When she finished, the silence in the room felt electric, charged with anticipation. One board member leaned forward. "This is an ambitious plan, Sarah. You've clearly invested a wealth of effort here. What's next after this?" With a firm voice, Sarah described the next steps, outlining initial phases of implementation and strategies for continuous reflection. Yet as she spoke, a sense of clarity emerged, not merely in the direction of her plan but in her own identity. She was ready to be the innovator, the artist, and the educator she had long desired to be. As discussions unfolded, support blossomed from different board members. The weight of skepticism faded like morning mist, too faint to resist the momentum solidifying around her concept. Weeks later, standing on the eve of the first pilot program launch, Sarah looked at a canvas of possibility. She wasn't just a teacher anymore, she had become a conduit for emergent ideas, a beacon for collaboration, and a voice for change grounded in resilience. This is only the beginning, she thought, her heart swelling with fulfillment. Her trajectory had shifted not towards mere survival within a rigid framework, but toward companionship with innovation, daring to embrace her creativity wholeheartedly. As she prepared to dive into this new chapter, it was more than the accomplishment of a proposal that filled her with satisfaction. It was the realization that through her struggles, she had triggered a transformation not just within herself, but within her educational community. This sense of achievement felt like a final stroke of color on a canvas she had once feared would remain blank, a bold declaration vibrating with the power of self-discovery and growth. Now was the moment for others to embrace their own potential. It was about time they joined her journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, your support is crucial. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now, don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand how vital it is to support the channel through these actions.